Welcome, nice and blunt. It's time to talk rookie running backs for 2022. This is a quick preview of the top 10 running backs coming into the league this year before the draft. So this list will change once their landing spots are settled because that is very important, especially for rookie running backs. Early production is very much based on how much of a workload you can get. So landing spots are even more important for running backs than wide receivers. But that's it for disclaimers. Let's get into it. Let's go. Let's start at number one because there is an obvious pick as the number one running back this year. It's Breece Hall, the junior from Iowa State. In 12 games in the Big 12 last season, he ran the ball 253 times for 1,472 rushing yards, 20 rushing touchdowns. He also caught 36 receptions for another 302 yards and another 3 touchdowns. So very impressive, very efficient stats from Breece Hall. And it wasn't just his junior season where he was that effective. He had back-to-back college seasons with over 1,750 total yards from scrimmage and 23 touchdowns in each of those seasons. Very, very dominant stats from Breece Hall in college, and he absolutely wrecked the combine. He comes in at 5'11", 217 pounds. He's fast. He ran a 4.39 40. His hands are big too, 9 3/4 inches, the biggest of any running back at the combine. A 40-inch vertical. That was the best vertical jump of any running back at the combine, and 126 on the broad jump is only 2 inches shorter than the number one performer in that category. So Breece Hall is an absolute beast, and he's very young. He's one of the youngest running backs in this year's class, only 20.7 years old as of today, and he is going to have a long career. There's also a next-gen score when you go to the NFL Combine player profiles on their website, and he's the only one with a 99, an absolutely elite score from Breece Hall. He's a no-brainer, and if you need more convincing, here's a couple of plays off of his highlight reel. You can see the explosiveness. He's a very, very entertaining player to watch, and I can't wait for him to make his NFL debut. If he's not drafted as the number one running back, I would be absolutely shocked. And no matter where he goes in the NFL, he's going to get a big workload day one. Breece Hall is your number one rookie running back this season. Lock it in. But let's move on. At number 2, I have Kenneth Walker III, the junior from Michigan State. Now here, he's about 7 months older than Breece Hall. He's 21 at the moment. And in 12 games in the Big 10 last season, he had more touches than Breece Hall. 263 rush attempts for 1,636 yards, 18 touchdowns. He also got 13 receptions for 89 yards and another touchdown. So great at running the ball, a little bit less polished in terms of a receiver. However, I think he's ready to go day one as well. And he also had some pretty good stats at the combine. He's only 5'9", but weighs 211 pounds. He runs a 4.38 40, one of the fastest times at the combine. He has 9.5-inch hands, so it's going to be hard to force fumbles on him. And he may not be as explosive as Breece Hall, but still pretty respectable stats in the vertical, a 34-inch jump, and in the broad, a 122-inch jump. Now, something to keep in mind, he transferred from Wake Forest in the ACC to Michigan State for his junior season, and if it wasn't for that, he may not have popped off. He was absolutely dominant last season with over 1,700 total yards. But the highlight reel for Kenneth Walker is also pretty impressive. Let's just take a quick look at a couple of plays. But let's move on to number 3. This is where it got a lot more tricky and a little less obvious. It's Rachaad White out of Arizona State. Now, he is a senior. He is 23 years old, so there may not be as long of a career in Dynasty perhaps, but I really think that he's ready to contribute to just about any team, and not just as a runner, also as a pass catcher. In 11 games in the Pac-12 last season, he had 182 rush attempts for 1,000 yards, rushing 15 touchdowns, but he also caught 43 receptions, which he turned into 456 yards and a touchdown. So over 10 yards a catch, and very respectable numbers coming out of Arizona State. He's a big guy too. He comes in at 6 foot tall, 214 pounds, runs a 4.48 40, so a little bit slower, but still that's nothing to be worried about. And he has big hands too, 9.75 inches, a 38-inch vertical, and a 125-inch broad jump. That was one of the best performances at the combine at the running back position. So I think you can rely on Rachaad White, especially for those receptions. And you know in fantasy football, that's very, very important. I like Rachaad White's talent quite a bit, but keep in mind, even though he is a senior, he did not play football at Arizona State until his junior season. Now, I found these stats on sportsreference.com. Perhaps they're lacking, but there's no other player who I've seen has their stats from their freshman or sophomore year missing. So my understanding is that Rachaad White did not play football his first 2 years in college. If that is incorrect, please correct me in the comment section, but if that's true, then I think that also plays a factor and is one of the reasons why I'm very excited about his potential. He could improve even more once he gets great coaching in the NFL. So I love Rachaad White, and let's just take a quick look at his highlight reel. I think you'll see some explosiveness too. But I understand if you're a little bit hesitant on him. The main reason why I love him so much is because when it comes to all of these players that I'm going to mention in this video, he had the most receiving yards per game of any other running back, and that's going to translate to fantasy success, and that is why I really like Rachaad White. He comes in at number 3 for me. Coming in at number 4, though, Isaiah Spiller, the junior from Texas A&M. Now, he is the youngest running back in this year's class, so that's one thing that he has going for him. He has the longest runway, still has room to improve, and I think once he gets some NFL coaching, he is going to get better. However, in 12 games in the SEC last season, he only had 179 rush attempts, kind of a smaller workload compared to the names we've mentioned so far. He turned that into 1,011 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. He also caught 25 receptions for 189 yards and another touchdown. So decent stats in the receiving game, but only 7.6 yards per reception, a little bit lower than some of those other players. And he is 6 feet tall, 217 pounds. So he's got some size on him, some bulk on him, and I think at least on the goal line, he won't have too difficult of a time. However, he did not run the 40 at the combine. That's a little bit concerning. I don't really know why. But we'll see how fast he is at his pro day. However, those aren't the most reliable stats, especially for the 40. However, his combine performance kind of concerns me. He only had a 30-inch vertical and a 114-inch broad jump. Those are both the lowest among his peers in both of those stats. No other player I'm going to mention in this top 10 list had lower numbers in either of those categories. And the stat that concerns me the most is his hand size. Only 8 and 5/8 inches. There are almost no running backs with hands smaller than 9 inches from this year's combine. So that in itself is concerning. It might be easier for him to fumble, maybe a little bit less likely for him to catch the ball. I feel a little bit reserved on Isaiah Spiller. However, I'm still willing to keep him at number 4 because he is very young, and I do think he has some unrealized potential. And he did play in the SEC. Like, that's some legit competition. 5.6 yards per carry is very respectable, so I don't think you should diminish him too much, but I feel like I might still have him a little too high. I feel like I'm definitely worried about Isaiah Spiller, but for now, I do consider him a top 5 running back in this year's class. But let's just take a quick look at some of his game tape before we move on. All right, so that's Isaiah Spiller for you, but let's keep it moving. At number 5, I have Zamir White, the junior from Georgia. Now, he's 22 years old, so he's a bit older for a junior, but in 15 games last season in the SEC, he had 160 rush attempts. He turned that into 856 yards, 11 rushing touchdowns. However, he only caught 9 passes for 75 yards, so he's not really a big contributor in the passing game. And keep this in mind, I do have a bit of a soft spot for Georgia running backs. You know that my favorite running back in the NFL is Nick Chubb. I was very high on Sony Michel last year, and I'm still kind of high on him. So maybe that is skewing my judgment a little bit, but I do believe that this is one of the colleges that really prepares their running backs well. And the fact that he only had 11 touches per game last season means he's going to be fresh for the NFL, and once he gets into the league, I think he's going to be very, very effective. He also comes in at 6 feet tall, 214 pounds, so pretty decent in that regard. Maybe he could bulk up a little bit more for that size, but I think that's still pretty fine. He is fast as well. He ran a 4.4 flat 40 at the combine, and his hand size is really the only red flag for me, and that's probably one of the reasons why he isn't huge at catching the ball. But he has the smallest hands of any running back that I'm going to mention in this video, only 8.5 inches. And that's definitely not encouraging, but it's not the end of the world. So it would be more important if he was a quarterback or perhaps a wide receiver, but maybe fumbling could become an issue with hands that small. However, the explosiveness is there, 33.5 inch on the vertical, and the longest broad jump of any other running back at the combine, 128 inches. That is even better than Breece Hall. So I am excited about Zamir White, and as I was watching some coverage on the combine, LaDainian Tomlinson loves this guy, and that's an opinion I definitely respect. So Zamir White needs your attention, and he's a top 5 running back for me. And it's also worth noting that when he was a sophomore, he only played in 10 games, so that's 5 fewer than last year, but he did score 11 touchdowns in that season as well. So very encouraging. I think on the goal line, Zamir White is going to make a lot of money and be very efficient. I like him quite a bit. But in case you've never seen him on the field, here's a couple plays from his highlight reel to give you a taste of what to expect. All right, so I like Zamir White quite a bit, and at number 6, I have Kevin Harris, the junior from South Carolina. Now, his stats in his junior season are not really the stats that I want to look at. It's more so his sophomore season that was the most dominant. And when he was a sophomore, he had just barely under 1,300 yards from scrimmage. He also scored 16 touchdowns in only 10 games. So he got injured, and that is one of the factors in terms of his junior season, I believe. He didn't have the biggest workload. So in 12 games as a junior in the SEC, he ran the ball 152 times for 658 yards, only 4 rushing touchdowns, so that's not really encouraging, but those sophomore stats really make up for it. And he also caught the ball only 12 times for 95 yards, so not the most versatile player, not huge in the receiving game. However, he comes in at 5'10", 221 pounds, so he's built and he's ready. He definitely has an NFL body for the running back position. He did not run the 40 either, so that's a little bit concerning. However, his hand size is not a concern at all. 9.25 inches, that's definitely on the above average side, and 38.5 inches on the vertical, one of the highest numbers of all the running backs at this year's combine, only second to Breece Hall, and just as good on the broad jump, also 126 inches. We are judging all of the rest of these running backs by comparison to Breece Hall because he was just absolutely dominant. So that is where I'm very encouraged. Very similar stats in that regard. However, the next gen score, remember Breece Hall's was 99, Kevin Harris's was only 65. So if that is a big red flag for you, then maybe you might think I'm a little too high on Kevin Harris, but I really think that sophomore season in the SEC, when he was so dominant, speaks for itself, and it's why I'm not concerned. He's 21 years old, so one of the younger running backs in this year's class, and I think he also has a long runway. Still some unrealized potential. NFL coaching will do him some good. But here's a couple plays from his highlight reel just to give you an idea of what to expect. Let's keep it moving, though, because at number 7, I have another Georgia running back. It's James Cook, the senior from Georgia. And yes, it is true that is Dalvin Cook's younger brother. You can see the resemblance when you have the two pictures side by side. But at 22 years old, he's the same age as Zamir White, although Zamir White was a junior. And in 15 games in the SEC, he ran the ball only 113 times, but he turned that into 728 yards. So pretty effective despite a smaller workload. 6.4 yards per carry is definitely impressive. He had 7 rushing touchdowns, but he also caught the ball 27 times, turned that into 284 yards, and another 4 touchdowns. So 11 total touchdowns, over 1,100 yards from scrimmage, and 10 plus yards per reception. James Cook is definitely a versatile player, and I like his hands. He's going to be good from day one. It'd be interesting for the Vikings to draft him, but I doubt that'll happen. He comes in at 5'11", 199 pounds, so one of the lighter players at the running back position. He may need to bulk up a little bit, but he's also very fast. He ran a 4.42 40, and his hands are not small at all. He has a 9 3/8 inch hands. That is definitely not an area of concern, but the vertical and the broad jump, pretty respectable, 33 inches on the vertical and 124 on the broad jump. However, he had no more than 61 touches in his first 3 college seasons. So that is a little concerning. It took him till his senior year to really get going. However, don't let that worry you too much. He's still only 22 years old. Rachaad White, another senior, is a full year older than him. Like I mentioned, he's the same exact age as Zamir White. Here's a couple plays from his highlight reel to give you an idea of how he performs. But just like Zamir White, I love the coaching out of Georgia, and I think he's going to be a good contributor once he enters the NFL, and I'm excited about his rookie season. He is my number 7 running back. But let's keep it moving, because at number 8, I have Jerome Ford, the 4th-year junior out of Cincinnati. And in 13 games last season in the American Conference, he ran the ball 215 times for 1,319 yards and 19 rushing touchdowns. So very efficient on the goal line. He also caught 21 passes for 220 yards and another touchdown. So put that all together, and he had over 1,500 yards from scrimmage and 20 touchdowns last season. That's definitely a dominant, impressive performance. Cincinnati was one of the best teams in the nation last year, and Jerome Ford was a big reason why. He comes in at 5'10", 210 pounds, 4.46 on the 40, and 9 1/8 inch hands. Pretty respectable, pretty average. Not the most explosive player, however. 31 inches on the vertical, 118 on the broad jump. Definitely below average when you compare him to his peers. But it is worth noting that he originally spent his freshman and sophomore year at Alabama before transferring to Cincinnati. That is my only concern. He had to get into a easier conference in order to really explode. But the opportunity was there for him to succeed. He got a big workload, and now he's declaring for the NFL draft. So Jerome Ford is a name to keep in mind. However, at this point in the list, I'm a little bit more concerned. There's more red flags on each of these players. But here are a couple plays from his highlight reel. Let's keep it moving. At number 9, I got Tyler Badie, the senior from Missouri. Now, in 12 games in the SEC at the age of 23, he ran the ball 268 times. He turned that into 1,612 yards, 14 rushing touchdowns. But this stat really impressed me. 54 receptions last year for another 330 yards and another 4 touchdowns. So overall, 1,900 plus yards from scrimmage and 18 touchdowns last season. That's very impressive from Tyler Badie. And it was in the SEC, so it's not like that's bad competition. There are definitely some impressive stats. However, when you look at his stats from the combine, you might get a little concerned. He's one of the shortest running backs in this year's class, only 5'7", comes in at 197 pounds, so he's on the smaller side. That's definitely a concern, but he does have some good speed. 4.45 on the 40, 9 1/8 inch hands, pretty decent there, and decent explosiveness, 33.5 inches, 121 on the broad jump. Nothing to be worried about. Those are definitely some respectable stats from Tyler Badie. But if you're in Dynasty, he's one of the older running backs in this class. He's over 23 years old. And the main reason I like him so much is because of the receiving work. In his last 3 years in college, he caught 114 receptions in 34 games. So that's an average of 3.4 receptions per game. And when you look at the NFL stats, there were only 8 NFL running backs who caught more passes on a per game basis last season. So I understand it's more difficult competition, but in fantasy football, you need running backs who can catch the ball, not just run it. And Tyler Badie will be useful in that regard. So keep him in mind, especially in PPR formats. I think Tyler Badie will boost his value with that receiving role. But here are a couple plays from his highlight reel just to give you an idea of what to expect. All right, so the last player in this top 10 is Tyler Allgeier, the 4th-year sophomore out of BYU. So technically he's a senior, but don't worry about that. Let's just look at his stats from last season. In 13 games last year, he ran the ball 276 times. That's the biggest workload of any running back I have mentioned in this video. And he turned it into 1,601 rushing yards and 23 rushing touchdowns. That's the most of any player as well. However, the conference that he played in is not necessarily the toughest level of competition. However, he did have some work in the receiving game, also 28 receptions. So a huge workload for Tyler Allgeier, over 300 touches in 13 games last season. He had another 199 receiving yards, but no receiving touchdowns. He does the bulk of his work on the goal line, getting the ball out of the backfield. And the only concern that you can really have for him is his speed. He ran a 4.6 40. That's definitely on the slower side when you compare him to his peers. However, he's got the size. He comes in at 5'11", 224 pounds, and that explains why he was so good on the goal line. It really helps to have that extra weight. But his hands are really big, 9 5/8 inches. That's definitely on the higher side in this stat. And the explosiveness is pretty respectable, 33 inches on the vertical, 120 on the broad. Nothing that really jumps off the page there, but still pretty good when you compare him to the rest of his class. However, in 2020, when he was a third-year sophomore, he had 1,300 scrimmage yards, 13 touchdowns, and 7.5 yards per carry at BYU. So it's not his first season performing at a very high level, and I think Tyler Allgeier is going to have a good career in the NFL. I might be a little too low on him. But here's some highlight reel tape for you to enjoy. A couple plays that I thought really showcased his talent. So that's it for the top 10. However, it's not every running back that needs your attention. So some honorable mentions who barely missed this list are Dameon Pierce, the senior from Florida. I think he's very explosive, and he's going to be a good pass catcher as well. He did have slightly more touches as a junior, but a lot fewer touchdowns. He had 13 rushing touchdowns and 3 receiving touchdowns last season. So don't forget about Dameon Pierce, but another name who barely missed the top 10, Brian Robinson out of Alabama, a 5th-year senior. Both him and Dameon Pierce are about 23 years old, some of the older running backs in this year's class. But the only concern I kind of have for Brian Robinson is, why did it take till your 5th year in college to really break out? When he was a junior and a 4th-year senior, he had roughly only 100 touches in each of those seasons before he broke out last year with over 300 total touches. So it took a little bit longer for Brian Robinson to get going, but it's not like he's a full year older than everyone else. He's still younger than 23, so age is not a huge factor for Brian Robinson. He got into college at a young age. But the last 2 names I'm going to mention are Kyren Williams out of Notre Dame. He had a much better season as a sophomore than as a junior. He had over 1,400 scrimmage yards and 14 touchdowns 2 seasons ago for Notre Dame, but last year was just as comparable, over 1,300 yards from scrimmage and 17 total touchdowns. Some impressive stats from Kyren Williams as well. And the last player I'm going to mention is Pierre Strong. He had the fastest 40 time at the combine of any running back. He ran a 4.37, and he only played in 9 games as a sophomore, but he played in 15 last year and put up over 1,800 yards from scrimmage for South Dakota State. So not the best conference, but still very, very efficient. He also had 18 rushing touchdowns last year. So those are the names that I think need your attention. And just to recap that top 10 list, I got Breece Hall at number 1, Kenneth Walker III at number 2, Rachaad White comes in at number 3, Isaiah Spiller at number 4, Zamir White at number 5. At number 6, I have Kevin Harris. Number 7, I have James Cook. Number 8, Jerome Ford. Number 9, Tyler Badie. And number 10, Tyler Allgeier. But if there's any players I failed to mention in your opinion, or you have some questions about some names who did not make this video, let me know in the comment section. I'll be honest, I don't really watch any college football during the regular season. I'm very preoccupied with the NFL, and college football has just never really been as entertaining to me personally as the pro game. So maybe I'm a little bit biased, maybe I have some blind spots in this category, but keep in mind, landing spots are very important. So don't consider this list a final rankings. It's definitely going to change after the draft, but for now I feel pretty much confident with how it is for the moment. But if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. I'll be updating you with free agency news all throughout this offseason. And before you know it, we'll get into draft prep every day of the week. So just be patient. We'll be in August before you know it, and football will be back. But for this video, that's it for me. My name is Adam Riancho, and thank you for watching Nice and Blunt.